When playing Destiny 2, the most important choice you actually have to make is what build are you going to use. This can be the difference maker of making the game feel impossible to feeling like you are invincible even on ultimate difficulty. With all that said, there is still critical errors you see in builds all of the time, so here is the top 5 mistakes you will want to avoid in order to make your build as powerful as it can possibly be. At number 1, this does seem to be hunters mostly, but anyone can be a victim of this, and it is just over-investing into damage resist, often at the expense of offensive capabilities. So here's an example. You're running Prismatic Hunter on Tether with Ascension and Stylus Executioner. You have Praxic Blade with 4-piece Swordmasters, Facet of Purpose, Facet of Protection, and an exotic class item with the classic combination of Hoil and Certarachne. So you have 15% DR from Amplified, invisibility on any final blow due to Stylus Executioner, resist times 4, and exhausting enemies from Swordmasters, Void over shields with Facet of Purpose, 15% DR from Facet of Protection, and Woven Mail from Certarachne. And yes, with all of this, you aren't likely to die, but neither is anything else in any good time. What you want to do is build to a damage resist value where you can survive in the activities you're playing, and then just stop. It's also quite important to remember that killing things faster is kind of also a source of damage resist, because if there's less things attacking you, obviously you're just going to take less damage, so stacking up resist sources this high is even worse of an investment than it may originally appear. So without changing the identity of this build, here's what I would do. Swap out the exotic class item for something offensive. I'd say Fortune's Favour. Since Facet of Purpose is providing Void over shields anyway, this will provide an extra 15 to 20% weapon damage. At number 2, you might think I'm a bit crazy for this one, but hear me out. You've got to stop matching weapon elements with your subclass element. Most of the time this makes absolutely no sense, and you're actually losing out from element specific perks compared to their base value. Let me explain. If you are playing Arc Warlock, having a weapon with jolting feedback just doesn't fit. You can already jolt everything with rapidly looping abilities, even more so if you're using Arc Buddy with Spark of Shock, which will jolt every single enemy it attacks. You're not even going to have time to jolt enemies with your weapon before you start competing with your own grenade for who can apply jolt first. And the same applies to other elements. Stasis can easily slow and freeze enemies, but Chill Clip weapon isn't really providing much of anything. Void can provide volatile rounds, which makes destabilizing have less value than base. What you want your weapons with an elemental perk to be is something which covers your build's weaknesses. Sticking with Arc Warlock, this setup can be a bit of a glass cannon, so a repulsor destabilizing Locust Eater would be nice to give yourself an overshield. Or any weapon with heal clip so you can keep yourself in combat. The reverse is true too. If you're playing Solar Warlock, you could use a jolting feedback weapon here to add a damage over time source since you already have a lot of sustain. Another thing is expanding champion stunning capabilities. On Stasis you have no method of staggering unstoppables for some unknown reason, thanks Bungie, so a weapon with Burning Ambition would actually be a pretty good fit. Overall, giving yourself access to things you wouldn't normally have, instead of giving yourself even more of what you have an abundance in, is the play. At number 3, the rounded kit point is what we're going to go with. Over-investing into one stat is probably not the play, unless you are going for a very specific goal, like John Chunk. It's normally better to have stat investments around 70 to 80 in grenade, melee, super, class and weapons, maybe 100 plus in one of them, than having say 200 grenade, but then you have 30 super and 30 class. Every stat point you have is a trade-off somewhere else, and honestly the 100 plus benefits do typically have diminished returns compared to the 0 to 100. Importantly too, not having a reasonable stat spread can just completely break certain builds. Combination Blow Hunter The first thing you'll think is I really need 200 melee. But if you don't have at least 70 class, the ability loop of dodges into melees just won't even function. Any build using Spirit of Inmost Light relies on having class grenades and melees active to reduce the cooldowns of the others. Having any of these stats at 0 will break that loop. And also there's breakpoints. If you're running a Bonk Titan build of Worm Gods to just steamroll through everything, having a 100 plus melee stat will be beneficial, maybe. Some builds like this are just so strong that when done right, everything's going to die in one hammer anyway, so 80 melee is probably enough, allowing you to invest into weapons so you have that chance of double ammo bricks for more 1-2 punch shots, and your heavy weapon will be more capable in taking out boss enemies not in melee range. And honestly, the Bonk build might be a bit of a bad example, as it is one of those builds where you just go completely into one gameplay loop. If you're just running a well-rounded setup, even more so look for an even stat spread. At number 4, the part of builds where people just, I don't know, they've done the important part and at this point they just don't care. You even see this from YouTube build crafters. Sometimes they have a great idea for a build and you look at the fragments and it seems like it's just a lucky dip of 5 random ones. Maybe one was selected just because it provides plus 10 grenade. Fragments are just as important as aspects in order to make a build work. A lot of the mono element subclasses actually rely on a few specific fragments to make them worth running over prismatic. And there's obviously so many builds out there, I can't go with what fragments you want to use with every single build, but a lot of them do have a few common ones, fragments which can single-handedly carry a build. So here's a few standouts. On solar you have Ember of Ashes. Any scorch source is increased by 50%. Dragon's Breath and any incandescent weapon all but require this to be functional. Ember of Empyrean. Solar kills extend the duration of Radiant and Restoration, which gives both of these elemental effects much more value. Theoretically, a single Touch of Flames healing grenade could maintain you Restoration times 2, which is practically immortality, for an entire activity. On Void there's Echo of Undermining. Any grenade you use will apply weaken on hit. If you're on Void Warlock, this is just a must. And Echo of Starvation. Picking up an Orb of Power or Void Breach will give you Devour, which is one of the best subclass verbs in game, with a very easy requirement to obtain. On Arc there is Spark of Frequency. When gaining a stack of Bolt Charge while amplified, you will instead gain 2 stacks, which is a instant pick for any Storm's Keep Titans. And Spark of Magnitude. Lightning, Pulse and Storm nades will last longer. Again, this is probably one mainly for Arc Titans, but does have value on any Arc subclass. On Stasis there's Whisper of Rime. With this you can hold more stacks of Frost Armour up to 8 times instead of 5, which at this point is a 50% damage resist, and on top of that Frost Armour lasts for an increased 13 seconds. Whenever you shatter a Stasis Crystal, you are given 6 seconds of 500% grenade recharge rate. If you're using Rime Coat or Shatter Dive, this is one you absolutely need to make sure you have grenades active as much as possible. And Strand, Thread of Generation, dealing any damage grants grenade energy. It's not just a little bit too, this is a very noticeable amount. Dealing a lot of damage can get you a full grenade charge in a matter of seconds. And Thread of Warding. Collecting an Orb of Power gives you Woven Mail. This is like the Devour Void one, it's a simple requirement with a strong payout. On Prismatic, I will say about 80% of the fragments are very good, making it actually kind of hard to pick what you want on Prismatic, but this isn't a bad thing in any way. Shout out to Command, Courage, Purpose and Dawn. However, there's also the opposite. For anyone build crafting, I would recommend Destiny Data Compendium. It's good for everything, but especially fragments, as it shows actual percentage values and hidden cooldowns. This shines light on fragments which sound good, but due to either values or cooldowns are actually pretty bad. So a few examples of this. Spark of Amplitude creates an orb when defeating enemies while amplified. On Arc you are always amplified, so you'd think this would be pretty good, but it has a 10-second cooldown. Ember of Blistering grants grenade energy upon defeating enemies with ignitions, but red bars, the enemies which are only the likely ones to die from ignition blasts, only provide 8% grenade charge. Echo of Leeching. This isn't even a value thing, it's just how this functions. It provides access to health regen on melee final blow, but this health regen is cancelled upon taking any amount of damage, which makes it pointless for an aggressive melee build, especially when Devour already exists. Whisper of Shards. Shattering a stasis crystal increases its shatter damage. The part which isn't mentioned in game though is this is a 25 damage increase. Not 25%, just 25. Grenades typically deal between 500 to 1000 damage for a reference. Also, any prismatic fragment which provides increased transcendent energy is insanely undertuned. Finally, build crafting mistake number 5, the one you will see from randoms in your activities the most. You just want to use a build which is suited to the activity you're going to be playing. Here's of course some low hanging fruit here, like the bonk hammer tied to it talked about earlier. This ain't gonna do shit against a Witness in Salvation's Edge, but it can be more nuanced than this. Activities like the Lawless Frontier. This works a bit different to normal because there is no typical shield regen. So using Fortune's Favour here, despite it being a very good exotic, is just not the play, since you are less likely to ever be at full health for the overshield regen. Some Vanguard alerts like Birthplace of a Vial allow you to steamroll all enemies including the boss with a Praxic Blade setup. If you took that same build into a Liminality strike, where enemies are flying or otherwise not meleeable, it's just going to be miserable. All of this does apply much more to the one-trick pony builds. Apart from Buddy Warlock, if you're running that, don't worry, it works anywhere. But it's more so about just thinking ahead. A build can be very good for one activity, but just think what can you expect to see in the next activity and will it work out there too? In a lot of cases, it probably won't. Like just copying the oh my god best build ever generic clickbait slop, you know the ones, which is designed to work in, I don't know, Pinnacle Ops, might not work for a dungeon. And it's probably not the build what's bad, it's just suited for a certain activity. Again, except Buddy Warlock. That's busted. And above all else, yes, equipping a Praxic Blade is all it takes to make a build look good. Thank you for watching.